Hi everybody, this is Code Chris, and today I want to cover the ideas behind an episode called Nosedive. It's part of a series on Netflix called Black Mirror, which if you haven't checked it out, I strongly suggest you do. Now, Nosedive, as a quick reminder, Nosedive is an episode that basically shows a future where money is not the main form of exchange, but rather there is some sort of, for lack of a better term, social credit that is assigned to you amongst your community between 0 and 5 stars. You do things that in general society deems as good, then you are going to get ranked higher, and bad, you're negatively affected with your score, and this score is used for you to make all sorts of general transactions such as renting a car, showing your credit worthiness for the purchase of a home. Not really quite clear if a monetary system still exists or if this has taken place of a monetary system and is alongside and more of a credit worthiness kind of thing. But with all that, I think it's worth really exploring how close we are or if this is something that actually can happen. Now, before we get too much into the episode and a lot of the topics it covers, I just wanted to point out something that China does have, at least it's been referenced as some sort of social credit system. And to be fair, I'm not 100% familiar with how it all works mechanically. I did do some quick research, and it doesn't quite line up with how Nosedive works. The big difference going to be that, from what I've been able to see on my research, is that the China credit system, basically the government has established, here's the things that we deem, good and we want to promote and give you good credits for, and these are the things we deem bad, and yada yada yada. We know we're going to dock you points, right? And then how that credit is used is kind of similar to some of the examples used in the Black Mirror episode. But the big difference that you'll notice, and I don't really want to make them equivalent, is the episode of Nosedive. The episode of Nosedive basically uses your peers to evaluate you. It's more closer to a social media platform where each individual's opinion is giving a like or a dislike or a comment or whatever that promotes or demotes different items in a feed. And it seems like you have access to anybody you come across, their social media, area and that kind of thing. So I don't really want to say that they're really the same, because I'm sure that'll get brought up immediately as like, oh, it's just like the China credit system, and it's really not. And in fact, if anything, this is more of a democratically voted upon system that is truly as representative of the people around you as it can be. And you can start to see how it starts to grow into bigger segments from there. I think one thing that's very unique about this episode that makes it very uncomfortable is that we recognize that some of this stuff takes place. That idea that your social media persona is not the same as the person you are behind the screen when you're not posting different things. And that makes us really uncomfortable because we're like, oh, this could definitely happen. And my predictions for the future? Well, unfortunately, I do see some trajectory where this is going to be the case. It is my expectation that at some point in the relatively near future, the expectation that you have a social media presence, and what exactly that presence is online, will be a way for all sorts of different levels, from your credit worthiness to even your employer evaluating you. We already know this happens to some degree because of things like Facebook or YouTube channels, and sometimes it's a good thing where they can see that, oh great, things line up really well. But it's interesting because I also grew up before the internet was a big deal, right? So I remember, before Google was a recognized name, and people were still using things like Web Crawler and Ask Jeeves and Yahoo. And with that, the whole idea was always in the beginning, never use your name, never, reveal too much information. You need to be extra careful online about, revealing too much information about who you are, right? And now there's almost this expectation that, well, I should be able to find you on the grid somewhere. What is your name? A name is a very basic thing. And so, for example, when I decided to use Code Chris as my YouTube channel name, there was a little bit of hesitancy. It's like, well, should I use Chris? Because I don't really, but that's kind of the direction that people want. People want to be able to identify a name and figure out certain criteria that can be, categorized and put in a box of some kind, and so that they can evaluate it. And in this case of the YouTube channel, there's obviously going to be okay, cool, Code Chris, here's the kind of content he creates. Okay, cool, we got him. But outside this YouTube channel, I'm not exactly the exact same person. And since I'm producing different YouTube channels, links down below, you can see that there's a lot more complexity and different things going on, with my interests and my life. So it's worth considering that I think the social media persona expectation, unfortunately, I don't think it's going away, but I do think that people are more aware that there is a disconnect between what happens in the social media world is not always the real thing. And we're pretty familiar now with, not that things like influencers on Instagram or Twitter, YouTube, whatever, that's not necessarily a fair representation of what their life is actually like, or who they would necessarily be able to be comfortable sharing themselves with on a daily, you're just out and about life, day in the life. Now, another thing that's going to happen in this episode is eventually she will be penalized for the people that she just is in close proximity to and thereby associated with and makes friends with. And if they are not of a higher caliber ranking, then that pulls her down. And I do think that some of this actually does already take place. At least in the United States, like, politics has become very, very toxic in the sense where there's this whole team mentality of team red, blue, everything is grouped into like libertarian or socialist or Republican, all these different groups. And the idea or the problem rather with that is by giving any sort of credit or any sort of criticism to one of those groups, you are either for the entirety of what that platform is or against the entirety of what that platform is. And that association is a problem that we're starting to recognize, and we probably recognize already has happened, where many people are just exhausted with that sort of approach to politics and discussions, and it's made many a Thanksgiving, a Christmas argument happen in many families, and I think it's happened more recently in the last couple of years. Later, there's this scene where she takes a bite out of a cookie rather precisely in the attempt to get a very precise, beautiful image for her social media platform posting. And this is pretty much something that you see that's produced by the algorithm. I think this happens already. The request by the algorithm to promote and incentivize consistency and gamifying the necessity to constantly be posting, constantly be trying to get that traditional confirmation bias is really something that happens already. You'll see with all sorts of different people who are recording videos and posting them them online. One of the things that this channel is trying to do is set up a system in a way where I can spit out a new video every single day. And if you're doing it on multiple channels, I mean, that's even crazier. But the point is that there is that expectation or that preferential treatment given to those who are gamifying and evaluating that the system is rewarding the promotion of content. There's a part where she starts looking at a home and there's a hologram projected showing her inside of the home. This is something that already exists to some extent. So now, for example, what you'll see is that on Amazon, certain items will actually allow you to drop them inside your home and see it in 3D space to see how it would look. We know that this is actually not too far on the horizon. Now, the big cool thing about the future idea here is like, oh yeah, but you know, she's seeing it. She doesn't need her phone or anything like that. You guys remember Google Glass, HoloLens, all that kind of stuff, that augmented reality? I'm of the belief that augmented reality will become much more prevalent in the future. So imagine in this example where you're walking through a home and now they give you, oh yeah, here, go ahead and put on these, you know, HoloLens glasses, or, you know, activate your Google Glass equivalent, whatever that is in the future. And we'll just go ahead and project you onto a standard avatar inside what we know is a mapped out 3D space. We already have houses that can be mapped out with the 3D cameras and do the layouts. And as I'll talk about in later videos, we'll go ahead and show how the gap to not just go from picture to picture, but that seamless transition is very inevitable and actually not that far on the horizon. But going back to this, here's an example where just in general, the ad space of the future is going to change. Because here's the reality is that we, at least a lot of people, my generation and younger, don't accept a lot of the, you know, obvious advertisements that, you know, we just feel are kind of phony. But one thing that a good ad does is it is very, very specific to you. And we do know that with Google Ads and just in general SEO, it is very much about targeting very, very specific people. And so much so that we know we're getting to a point where things are being customized and catered specifically towards you so that you can get something that most likely you're going to purchase. It is better on the advertiser's end as well as the person who's receiving the advertisement. So custom ads like this will become a thing. So billboards, I think, are a thing of the past, but I don't doubt that this ability to somehow maybe get your phone to see a billboard, to see something that has your face in it that can easily be swapped out with different avatars, is definitely something that is going to be happening. If malls are going to return, if the experience of going somewhere to do something is what is going to really have a future in the monetization process, they're going to squeeze in more stuff like this. And it's really not that hard, and we're not that far away. Imagine being able to take your phone, toggle on whether it be an NFC or just your general GPS, and running whatever application, and as you walk through different locations, different spots, different things will trigger. And instead of being presented on your phone has a set of items, a grouping of things that it is able to pass off or share publicly, and those public things will be able to be catered and presented back to you in the form of an advertisement. I'm not saying any of this is good or bad. I'm just saying this is the trajectory and the future that you can actually expect to happen. Now we get to the most uncomfortable, scariest question that Nosedive starts to present. The actual nosedive, and if that's something that can actually happen. And this is where I need some more discussion with some people because I am not really sure. Okay, so we've all been here. You're at that spot where the person who is providing a service for you, you're getting some pushback, things aren't working nicely, and you know, things don't go quite the way you want them to, right? Now this is actually where Nosedive, I just don't know the credibility or the likelihood of it happening, and a part of me is afraid to really question how possible this is, at least within the United States. Now, granted, this is a British show, but I'm more familiar with how the United States works because I live in the United States. So in this situation, he's able to dock points for her and deal double damage, and basically it'd be the equivalent of somehow private companies having the ability to seize your account for your bank right now, or to freeze your credit, to prevent you from doing additional, whatever it is you want to do. I don't really see that happening so easily from a government level, because there's a lot of conflicts with freedoms and all that other stuff, right? So I don't see it happening as this kind of platform being something that the United States government could establish, as far as, well, you can't do this, you can't do this, whatever. What I could see is a private company, like not Facebook, but let's say Facebook decided to do something like this, or an Instagram, or whatever the next thing is, if it got to the scale where it actually mattered like this, it would quickly fall apart, because you would have enough people that would end up falling through the system that they just abandon it entirely, at which point it's not accepted through enough of a population without getting frustrated, that it ends up just collapsing upon itself. And I just don't see it being sustainable, because it's basically like giving Twitter the ability to make people successful or unsuccessful rather volatilely, and that's not a very credible system for any of the things that it's trying to establish in the episode, right? If it's a very volatile evaluation of somebody, then it's not really something that's very useful for anything other than just to have a personal star rank. And to some degree, this is what people like to see, a certain amount of likes, or thumbs up, or whatever, for that boost of affirmation that, like, hey, you're on the right track. But at the same time, I don't really see it providing the sort of economy, world, the utopia desire that it's hoping to achieve. Even if it could ever be established, it would quickly just fall apart, just because of the reason that once people start slipping through, they just start abandoning it. And I think that there's enough of the population that has abandoned even big platforms like Facebook already, that it's already difficult. Then on the other hand, when we do eventually meet this lady who is completely done with the grid, she doesn't care about the score system, and you start to find more and more of those people, you start to find this sort of like separate society, right? And then at this point, obviously, we're talking about different class systems and that kind of stuff. But the thing is that these people still function within society, right? They still have trucks, they still have jobs, they're still doing about their daily lives. And this is where I have a little bit of a question about what if it can or can't happen, because obviously a portion of the show kind of revolves around this idea of class and money, right? Where essentially there's this upper echelon of people of different incomes, and they associate themselves with people of similar class and incomes, and that it's just hard to move up and up the ranks, but it's very easy to go down the ranks. And I do wonder if you do get to a point where maybe something like this is established and it does fall apart. But for anybody that maintains the system, that system is still considered important. So like the upper class kind of a thing. So is that gonna work? As far as the lower end, I think the other thing I started to think about is the expectation with cryptocurrency. This is kind of establishing some sort of blockchain system where there's just this giant ledger, and at any point in time, people, when they interact with you or whatever, are going to look at that ledger and be like, oh, so-and-so, I know so-and-so, or wow, they give a lot of, whatever rankings, and they make those judgment calls on there. It's a really interesting question, and kind of in my opinion, a little bit of a scary proposal as far as what happens with the reality of this. And that's one of the really fun things about Black Mirror is it does take you to a point where you can question, well, how much of this is actually based on reality? How far away is this sort of dark timeline possible? And what can we do to prevent it? Does knowing about this kind of warning make a difference? Well, guys, those are just some of my thoughts on the episode of Nosedive and some of the ideas that it presents in regards to technology. And it's definitely a very interesting episode. I kind of wrapped up before getting to the end of the episode, just because at that point it's more narrative driven than what I think is actually sort of going to become more, realistic at that point. But with all that, I hope this has been interesting to you. Let me know your thoughts, or if there's anything else you think that I should be taking a look at and evaluating or giving my opinion on that is technology related, that has been presented to us as a vision of the future. Thank you guys for watching. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.